The 2022 season for the Indianapolis Colts is finally over. Where does the team go for here? Jim Irsay, Chris Ballard, what are their next moves? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast, to you by Fan Nation on S.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by colleague at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, we were here at Lucas Oil Stadium taking the action as the beat the Colts. How do you feel now that the 2022 season is over?
Well, I'm excited. I know that a lot of Colts fans are probably excited and they're ready to, move on. And you're already talking about the 2023 offseason. There's already coach talk. There's Ballard's press conference tomorrow. I mean, it's hitting the ground running with the drama and the moves and the offseason. So it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Absolutely. We are in for a very chaotic 4 to 5 months. That's just plain and simple. That's how it's going to be. That saying is over. I think a lot of Colts fans are feeling the same way about that. But before we get into everything, what do I have the show with? Go ahead and go and follow us on all the things. Go ahead and like us on Facebook at Horseshoe Hub. Go ahead and follow on Twitter at FN. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Hit the bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, because we're all have a special episode this week that you guys are not going to want to miss. So make sure you're subscribed to all the things and whenever we're going live, because this, like I said, this off season going to be very, very chaotic. So, Chad, good to see you. I think we will trade Shaq or JT for 2 picks. I don't know about that. We'll get into some off-season chatter, but I don't know if they're going to trade 2 of their franchise cornerstones for draft picks. We'll have to see on that. But Drake, let's dive in here. Colts lose a heartbreaker to the Houston Texans yesterday, 32-31. The Colts actually came back in this one. Texans led for most of the game. Colts came back and had a lead 31-24. And then Davis Mills, of all people, throws a Hail Mary with 50 seconds left. The Texans get the touchdown. They convert the 2-point conversion. And the Colts end the season with 7 consecutive losses. Drake, your gut reaction from that game yesterday? I think it was the only game you were at this year at Lucas Oil Stadium. How was it in stadium there with your girlfriend? And just tell us what you're feeling about that game yesterday.
It was as always. I'll never ever discount the amazing experience at Lucas Oil Stadium. It's perfectly built, awesome stadium. The game, however, you know how close it was to being a tie. Oh, man, that game was it was close to being a tie, and it went the same way. I mean, they started out slow. They were down by, 2 scores. They had to rally their way back. And I believe it's Rodney Thomas II. He had an interception in the game. And then he just somehow on that last play couldn't get his hands on the ball. And it went right through into Jordan Akins, who turned around and then got the 2-point conversion, and it seemed effortless. So just, a microcosm of the entire season built into one season finale.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is it was the perfect ending for the 2022 Colts. It didn't shock me what happened yesterday at all, just because I'm so used to these things happening to the Colts this year. It was wild to think about. They were actually able. They always thought, hey, are they actually going to win this game? And then the Texans just out of nowhere had that final drive. And I mean, credit to Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith said, we're not going to go out on a tie at this point. Who cares if we win or lose? Let's just go out and try to win this game. And then what does Lovie Smith do? He goes, he calls, tells them to go for it. They win the game, and then he gets fired a few hours later. So almost a big middle finger to the Texans brass as the Texans win, lose out on the number 1 overall pick as Lovie Smith is going out the door. But we're not going to talk too much about this game today, just because it was for the most part a snooze fest. I mean, there were some memorable moments. Zaire Franklin got the tackling record. He's now the franchise record holder for most tackles in the season. So congrats to Zaire Franklin. But other than that, I mean, congrats to Rodney Thomas II for getting that interception. He missed the second interception, and the stats Matt says, I don't know. Well, that's what stats Matt says here. Poor Rodney Thomas and Dallas Flowers. One gets the ball punched out by a teammate, and the other misses about as easy as of an interception as there can be.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, that's just the 2022 Colts. They find ways to lose games. That's been happening all year.
Well, and that's why they have the number 4 pick. That's why they have
Mm-hmm.
4 wins. They end the season with four wins, and I think they finished the Saturday era, which we'll talk about it. Could it continue? But
Mm-hmm.
1-7. You know, you finish 1-7 and you lose 7 in a row. And boy, I don't know if there's a worse way to lose than missing an easy interception to have a 7th straight loss with a guy that's already being questioned if he should even be coaching. Boy, it was just a very fitting end to the whole season that's been so chaotic.
JB says Rodney Thomas II statue being built in Chicago right now as we speak. I mean, hey, that was a defining moment. Chicago goes up to has the number 1 overall pick, but then JB says, but hey, the tank literally could not have been more perfectly in that worked perfectly in that perspective. And then really the Colts a month ago were slated to pick 14th in the NFL draft, and now they're going to be the 4th pick in the draft, possibly. Will they trade up? Will they stay put? That's what these 4 months are all going to be about. Just constant talk of what the Colts are going to do in what I wrote in my piece as the most important offseason for this franchise since Peyton Manning was drafted back in 1998. It's very interesting to see what this is going to happen. And Stats Matt, I already see your comment in there, buddy. Breaking news, and we'll talk about it here. The Colts request interviews with Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, and Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions. So we're starting to get some requests coming in live on the show. That's why Stats Matt is the 3rd host here for us. But I think we can just wrap a bow on the Colts Texans talk. If you watch the game, you know what happened. If you didn't watch the game, you didn't miss much. We'll just leave it at that. But let's get into it here, Drake. The Colts finished 4-12-1 on the season. Where does Jim Irsay go from here? Where does Chris Ballard go from here? There's a lot of question marks for this team. And I think it starts out with we're gonna from what I put in here, we're gonna kind of go a little bit out of order, but I think it starts out with the head coaching search. I think it really does, and that's kind of what we have been talking about all day, really. If you've been on horseshoehuddle.com today, we've had a ton of content out about coaching hires, about possible candidates, about who's going to be involved with the search, everything like that. And then Jeff Saturday gave a press conference today. There's just so much news. We're going to go through it all. But Drake, head coaching hire, where do you think the Colts go from here? What do you think the Colts are looking for in their head coaching hire? Who are some of the candidates? What do you think?
Well, the first one is as far as the head coaching search. Obviously, the 2 unicorns are Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh, which I'm sure everyone knows this, but if you didn't, it is such a long. It's almost like a road to Mordor to get one of those guys. I mean, it's such a difficult path. It's so much money. It's so much this and that. You have to turn over a lot of control to them. But they're the unicorns for coaching right now, and I do think that, as we've talked about, there's a chance that Jeff Saturday returns saying he has a clear and this is paraphrasing, but it's pretty close, clear and concise plan on how to turn this franchise around. And then lastly, there's a lot of other talent out there. Now, Cliff Kingsbury is out there. You have D'Amico Ryans, you have Mike Kafka, Leslie Frazier, Jim Caldwell. That's just to name a few. But as you know, they said they want a fiery guy who can get somebody moving.
It's going to be very, very interesting. just because you don't know which direction the Colts are looking at. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh's out there. Sean Payton, if Colts fans are thinking Sean Payton is coming to Indy or there's a chance, let's put the axe in that right now. I can guarantee you, from everything that I've heard and everything that I've been plugged into, Sean Payton will not be the next head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. Not only is Sean Payton not interested in coming to Indianapolis, the Colts would have to give up draft capital, which they desperately need to go get their young franchise quarterback to even get Sean Payton in the building. That's not going to happen. So we can axe that right now. But Jim Harbaugh is a very realistic candidate. It's going to come down to whether we talked about this last week in our episode, but it's going to come down to the Broncos, who are still interested in Harbaugh, and the Colts. There was a rumor that the Panthers had talked to him, but Jim Harbaugh and the Panthers are not interested in one another after that talk. It's going to be either the Broncos or the Colts for Jim Harbaugh if he even decides to leave Michigan and come to the NFL. But like you said, Leslie Frazier, defensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, who was on Tony Dungy's staff here in Indianapolis back in the mid-2000s. That's a name that will be looked at a lot. As Stats Matt has said just a few minutes ago, the Colts have requested interviews with Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Lions, who has only been the offensive coordinator there for one season. But the work he has done with Jared Goff and the work he has done with that Lions offense, very, very impressive. And Aaron Glenn, as you can see, the defensive coordinator for the Lions. Defensive Lions wasn't great, but Aaron Glenn is a guy that I think has great leadership abilities. And I think you saw that if you watched Hard Knocks this past summer with the Lions. You saw his leadership ability in that locker room. There's so many different ways that the Colts are going to go with this thing as far as their head coaching hire. Jeff Saturday is very much still alive in this head coaching conversation. And I think where someone said it earlier, and it was Stats Matt again. He said, I don't know what was more of a disaster, the season or the intro and exit pressers involving Saturday this season. Not all his fault, but they were bad. His press conference today was not impressive. He seemed like, for a guy that talks a lot about accountability, and a guy that said, if after 8 games this doesn't go well, I'll be the first one to say, God bless you. I am not good. I am no good. He thinks he's got a really legitimate shot at this. And for the ways he was talking about how he would make significant changes, this wasn't a great situation. Not once did I say, hey, I could have done better. And like, where's the accountability there? Drake, I'm not sure if you had a chance to kind of see his comments today, but did you really get that from Jeff Saturday about how he preached accountability? But yeah, I haven't seen it in these press conferences from the head command himself.
Well, you have a complete flip-flop, which this is before he had even coached, a single game. He said, God bless you. Maybe he in his mind was saying, you know what, I can say this because I am confident in myself. This is a former center for Peyton Manning. This was the general of one of the greatest offensive lines of the 2000s. This was the guy who made the play calls on the line. And so he's confident. He thinks he can do it. I get it. But to not say and not take some of the weight when you have Gus Bradley being about the only competent coach at all, your line, Chris Strasser can't get anybody to block correctly. Your offensive play caller that you picked, by the way, doesn't understand how to call plays that can just at least throw off a defense. He just throws the ball to the defense. So it is a little frustrating because everyone loves Jeff Saturday, but if you're going to be the coach, you have to, goodness, you got to take something. You can't just, say, oh, I knew this season was going to be rough going in. Come on.
I'd agree. And there are still people out there that like Jeff Saturday. JC Crate, he says, bring back Saturday, get him a quarterback and a better offensive line. Was it just the quarterback? I think when Jeff Saturday did come on board, the offensive line did do a lot better. The second half of the season,
They did.
the offensive line was rated as one of the better offensive lines, not top 10, I would say, but it was in the better half of the NFL. You saw Bernard Raymond really come into his own and go up against very good pass rushers, and for the most part hold his own. And that's just going to continue to get better as he gets more playing time, as he gets better playing strength within the NFL. Do the Colts make a move at right guard, or does Will Fries that start next year? I think Will Fries is talented. I think he's a very hard worker, but I think the Colts, not only should they bring in competition all throughout the line, but right guard and left tackle specifically. I saw someone on Twitter said we could pencil in Bernard Raymond as the left tackle. And I thought it was Keenan on Twitter, VV Jones, his @ on there, that said that. And I like penciling in, because he still has to go out there during training camp and earn it and show what he's made of. We don't need this giving the job to someone like the Colts did with Matt Pryor, and then we all saw how that blew up. Bring in competition for both spots. Let the best man win. You would think that it would be Raymond. Right guard is a little bit more suspect, and it might be somebody else, whether it's a rookie, a veteran, Will Fries. We'll have to see. But so much can happen. So much can happen. But I don't know if really a quarterback and an offensive line really fixes things all that much for Jeff Saturday. We are seeing here from Jim, replace Strausser with Jeff Saturday and bring Byron Leftwich in as the head coach.
Oh, wow.
Byron Leftwich, I don't know if he is on the Colts radar. I definitely think he definitely isn't one of the hot names right now for head coaching candidates, just because of the way the Buccaneers offense has kind of taken a step back. But it is an interesting name. And Stats Matt makes a good point here. Most important coaching hire since Tony Dungy, in my opinion. And that was back in 2002. That was after Jim Mora was here for 4 seasons after the playoffs rant.
Very funny guy.
Gosh. And then the Colts went all in for Tony Dungy. Stats Matt says, personally, we got to go offensive, in my opinion. You go defensive and you lose your offensive coordinator in 2 to 3 years, and your young quarterback has to start over. That is the risk with going as a defensive hire. Jeff Saturday back as the offensive line coach. I don't know if that's a possibility, though. I think Jeff Saturday, and even he said in his presser today, that he doesn't want to go the coordinator route or as an assistant coach route. If he would have done that. But it doesn't seem like he's very interested in that. Jay says, I agree with the statement totally. He took the job knowing the disaster it was and incessantly keeps referencing that it was bad when he got here. And I mean, it even got worse, to be fair. And Jay's absolutely right. Like Jeff Saturday knew what he was getting into. And yes, it was a bad situation. But at the same time, things didn't get better. Pretty much everything around the Colts, maybe minus the offensive line, got a little bit better, but the quarterback play regressed. The wide receiver play regressed a little bit. The running game maybe maybe stayed about the same. It's hard to tell when Jonathan Taylor's not really in there. The defense regressed. Not going to really put that on Jeff Saturday, but I think they were just kind of over the weight of holding up this team the entire time. I'm not sure how Jeff Saturday really has a leg to stand on saying, well, yeah, I can turn things around, but yet you didn't show any improvement really as a team through these 8 games, and everything else got worse. I mean, Steve Wilkes and Carolina almost got his team to the playoffs as the interim head coach.
PJ Walker
with PJ Walker, Sam Darnold, guys like that. So I think Jeff Saturday is a serious candidate for the Colts, but should he be the one leading this team next year? No, absolutely not.
Well, and like you said, look, I've heard, and it's fair, on paper, and just it's fair to hear, and an argument in itself is to say, well, you came in, you got thrown into this, you had some injuries here, some injuries there, you had bad sync between Matt Ryan and his receivers, then you switched to Ellinger, then you switched to Foles, and then you got Parks Frazier calling the plays, and okay, well, as you just highlighted, there have been coaches that have had worse situations and lower paid offensive lines, by the way, that have been able to do more, and in some cases get into the playoffs. Okay. I mean, it legitimately can happen. So the argument that he didn't have the talent, I get it. You could have probably still eked out maybe 3 wins out of 8 instead of just one. That's my opinion. Not to throw, shade on Saturday. It's just you got to handle that a little bit better.
Right, absolutely. And it's I like this. I like this. We're talking about Saturday a lot. We got to move on here, but I like this comment by Chad. I think Raymond will be our franchise left tackle. Kid has potential. Give him this offseason, no TAs, and he could be solid next year. Chad, I agree. I agree 100% that Bernard Raymond has shown that promise to be a franchise left tackle. Now, is Raymond going to be an all-pro left tackle? I don't know about that. That remains to be seen. We don't exactly know how high his ceiling is, but I think Colts fans would be pretty happy if you would get maybe Anthony Costanzo or Anthony Costanzo light out of your left tackle position. I think Colts fans would take that in a heartbeat. And because of how just the steadfast rock Anthony Costanzo was for this team for so long. Wyatt Law asks a good question. Is this the year we lose Ed Dodds or Morocco Brown? And that kind of goes into our next topic of talking about Chris Ballard and the roster building. Because Ed Dodds, the assistant general manager for the Colts, Morocco Brown, the director of player personnel, the number 3 with the Colts. These two have been very hot names in the GM circles for the past couple of years. They've turned down offers. They've been interviewed multiple times, waiting for the right fit. I'm not sure if they'll be as hot of candidates now, just considering what has happened with the Colts over this year. But there still is a chance that they could move on, especially if they see that maybe things aren't going to go so well and that Chris Ballard could be on the hot seat. So let's talk about Chris Ballard real quick, Drake. Chris Ballard, what does he need to do this offseason in order to make sure something like 2022 doesn't happen? And do you think he will be able to do that?
Well, I think it was, I believe it was Stats Matt that said, the offense really needs to be bolstered. Look, you have 20, you still, by the way, I think they've had like they've been in the top half, mostly the top 10 of available cap space, I think, for like ever, it seems. And they're still 11th with 28,815,801 available. That is enough to get some help at receiver, potentially a right guard, like you said, to compete with Will Fries. And you got to get a little bit more firepower, potentially retain Campbell. There's just decisions in free agency. And then I think on the defensive side, if Ngakoue and Okereke walk, I mean, they're going to, which is very likely for both of them to be gone. They're going to need rotational piece at defensive end and, potential starter at linebacker.
Yeah, there's a lot on Chris Ballard's plate.
That's just a little bit.
There really is. And I think I mean, you talk about all the guys that could possibly be leaving. I think the loss of Bobby Okereke, if Shaquille Leonard comes back, which he said that second surgery he feels a lot better from it. He thinks that did the trick. The nerves are firing like they should be. And now it's just kind of getting his strength back. I think if you have Shaq Leonard in there with Zaire Franklin, I think the linebacker position is fine. I really do. I think both those guys, you can have one hell of a tandem at linebacker. Will I miss Bobby Okereke? Absolutely. He's a great player. But he has outplayed the contract that the Colts are going to be willing and able to give him. So I don't expect Okereke back. Ngakoue, it'll depend on his asking price. If he's asking for around $15 million a year, which I've seen reported, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no
way.
If
it's around $10 million a year, maybe they kick the tires on that. We'll have to see. Dio Odangbo has kind of ascended. We saw Kwity Paye when he was fully healthy play pretty well. And the Colts are always looking to get more pass rushers. But I think the biggest thing for Ballard is he's got to reevaluate his entire roster building philosophy. He really does. Well, he has been great in the draft. And as JB says, most of his drafts have been successes. And I agree there. But the way he hasn't prioritized the top high value positions, such as quarterback and wide receiver, left tackle, cornerback. This isn't the 1980s. The Colts' best players on their team are a left guard, an off-ball linebacker, and a running back. That's not how you win football in 2023. You need a quarterback, which assuredly the Colts will take a quarterback with their first pick, but you need top talent on the outside, top wide receivers. You do need an offensive line. While he has invested a lot in this offensive line, it has certainly regressed and has looked just as bad as it was before Chris Ballard even got here. Why? That's not, I mean, is it coaching? Is it players just regressing? I don't know. We could probably do a whole episode on what the offensive line, why they have regressed. But he really needs to evaluate this stuff. The Colts say they evaluate everything every offseason. But if he is truly doing that, he needs to be incredibly honest with himself. Jim Irsay needs to be incredibly honest with him. And so does the people around him, that there are flaws in his strategy and how he is building this team. And if he doesn't change and adapt to how the NFL is in 2023, I don't see the Colts becoming a contender with Chris Ballard as their general manager.
Well, and you can't hold your money for too long. You need to go spend it. I mean, it's a perfect example of that is the 2020 champions, the Buccaneers. They went and they spent a lot of money and they won a championship. And then last year you had the Rams take a championship, and that's because they spent a whole bunch of money in free agency grabbing a guy that they outspent the Colts to get. So that being Matthew Stafford. So he's also going to potentially, it really depends on the draft. You know, you're talking about two quarterbacks. It really depends on, are you going to go number one? Are you going to trade up? Then you should probably take Bryce Young. And if you're willing to sit at 4, well, you should probably take CJ Stroud or Will Levis. I mean, to me, people are like, what happens if they don't take a quarterback? I'm like, look, they are taking a quarterback. It's one of those 3 guys. It's a little shake it up and let's pick a name type thing for me. It just really depends on what they do in the draft.
And we've got more breaking news here from Stats Matt. Raheem Morris is another interview. Camden Roberts also. Raheem Morris is requested for an interview. Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams, and he's a guy that's been out there. He has previous head coaching experience as well with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if I remember correctly. But so. There were a lot of people saying, well, the Broncos are certainly requesting a lot of guys right now. Why aren't the Colts? And I said, this is a process. Just let it happen. And here we go. The Colts are going to take their time with this. But I think what you said was spot on. Is I'm not necessarily of mind that you want to go out and you want to spend heavily in free agency. I don't think you can buy a team. And as you can see, while the Buccaneers went out and the Rams went out, they both had pretty pitiful years. The only reason the Buccaneers are in the playoffs is because they're in a terrible division. But I do think you need to use free agency to help plug your holes. I mean, why you're instead of relying on Danny Pinter to play right guard and be your starter there, a guy that's never started at that position really his entire life. You would let Mark Lewinsky go, which was probably the right move. I mean, Lewinsky was going to be expensive, but then there's Chris Reed, a capable veteran on your roster that you just let go. You could have had for a couple million, if that. It would have solved a lot of the problems for this team, I think. There's various holes on maybe at wide receiver. You probably don't want to pay $20 million for a wide receiver unless it is one of the big time wide receivers, but go out there and get some help on that. Maybe look into investing in a tight end, or just when you have a hole there, not every hole needs to be plugged through the NFL draft. It's such risky business. Use your money in free agency to help plug those holes, even if it's for a year or two. But don't be afraid to do that and be so tentative like Chris Ballard has been in the past. We've got a lot of people here in the chat, so let's kind of go to some people's
let's unload some chats here.
Yeah, so let's go to some comments. Chat says he needs to hit this offseason with some fireworks and make some big moves. We'll have to see. Stats Matt talking about Yannick Ngakoue. Unique will probably be too much. He should only play 30% of the snaps. That's one thing. Ngakoue, great pass rusher. Was pretty good as a pass rusher for the Colts. One of the worst rated defenders against the run, according to Pro Football Focus this year. Taryn comes in and says, yeah, the trust the binder mindset isn't cutting it anymore. needs to be more like a guideline instead. And I like that.
True.
The binder that Taryn is talking about comes from when Chris Ballard was hired as the GM for the Colts. He came in with this really thick binder, telling of all the things he had written notes over about what he would do as a GM. Well, now that he is a GM, maybe not so much stick to that binder, but yeah, use it as a guideline. Don't be so rigid and so stubborn in your ways that you can't adapt to an ever-changing game like the NFL. And as Stats Matt says, need a non-build a Ballard wide receiver for like a slot. Yeah, I mean, that's
Nice.
a thing too. He's just so rigid with his ways, and it makes him miss out on top talent. One of the reasons Chris Ballard didn't want Kenny Moore, and I'm saying Kenny Moore didn't have the best season, but Kenny Moore also was a Pro Bowler last year. And Chris Ballard had to be talked into it by an area scout because Kenny Moore wasn't 6 foot tall. He was 5'9". Just because a player doesn't have your ideal size doesn't mean he should be written off entirely. I mean, you look at Tyreek Hill is 5'10", fast receiver in the NFL. Jalen Waddle, you're missing out on some very quality wide receivers out there just because they're not 6 foot and over 200 pounds.
T.Y. Hilton.
That's one of the reasons why T.Y. Hilton isn't a Colt right now.
He's killing it with Dallas.
It's just you don't need to be so rigid in your ways. That's what I'm saying. And Ballard's got to do that. Last thing we'll talk about here, and I think it's that draft pick at number 4. As Stats Matt says with the wide receiver, Devontae Smith. Not every wide receiver can be 6'3" or taller. Real quick, before we go into the quarterback, I want to answer Wyatt Claw's question. Any new head coach should be allowed to bring in his choices for coordinators. The one position coach I'd love to see retained would be Reggie Wayne. He did a really nice job with this young group. I would agree there. I would agree. Reggie Wayne has had a big influence on this group, and he certainly helped lead this young group into the NFL. How do you think Reggie Wayne did this year, Drake?
I think he did fantastic. You have a complete disconnect in constant revolving quarterbacks. And you have 2 linemen that really didn't know. It's no offense to them. They just didn't have any business starting at all. I mean, it is not on the wide receivers. In fact, we both felt like out of the position groups, they did the best. And, as far as the head coach, these names you're seeing, they're not all the names. Not one have we even mentioned on this show, I don't think. That tells you, and I think I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Irsay. But they're going to be looking into the guys that nobody's talking about. They're going to try to find that diamond in the rough that no one's making the offers to, that they can slip underneath and just grab and just get out from everybody else's, right out from under the nose of people. So, you'll probably hear about the big names, but don't be surprised if you keep hearing maybe a couple more interviews from some people that you didn't hear in the headlines.
Absolutely. So let's move it on to the quarterback position, or that draft pick.
Oh, yeah.
That number 4 overall pick has to be a quarterback. It just has to be. Drake, I mean, it is January what? As I look at my watch, January 10th, 9th.
Yeah.
It's going to be flip-flop so many ways. There's going to be so many opinions. We're not even to the Senior Bowl, the Combine, anything like that. What as of January 9th, what is your strategy for the Colts at that pick right now?
You know what? How about for the show for the show's purpose? I will come up with a bold prediction.
If it's not a quarterback, burn the building.
Burn the building down.
I love you.
Yeah, that's not even a bold prediction. But let's see. They need to get up to number 1. I think that they have the shot. The Bears don't even need a quarterback at all. The Bears are just sitting there waiting. They're just like, we'll take offers now. And they're probably, I mean, if they end up having to use it, I'm sure they'll be happy to use it, but they don't want to do that. They want to get out of that pick and get something for it. I think you need to go number 1. I think you need to take Bryce Young.
That's what a lot of people have been saying. If they fall in love with Bryce Young and they absolutely want their guy, they need to make sure they get ahead of Houston at 2. What it will take to leap Houston from 4 to 1, I'm not really sure yet. There have been some comparables in the past, but not exactly a 1-to-1 ratio. I definitely think it's going to take probably a future first-round pick. We'll have to see. Doesn't necessarily have to be. I've seen some wild trades out there that I don't think will happen. And it's going to be interesting to see, does Houston offer the Chicago Bears to go up to make sure that Indy or another team doesn't jump them? Well, and if that happens, then do the Colts still try to get up to 2 to make sure they get a quarterback after Houston does? It's going to be so fascinating to watch and see what happens here, to really see if the Colts really fall in love with the quarterback and think he is the guy that could be their face of the franchise for the next 12 to 15 years and possibly lead them to multiple Super Bowls. Cost should not be a factor. You do whatever you can to go up and get that guy. That's all I'm going to say on that.
I got to say one thing. The craziest wish that I heard or actually read is that Quentin Nelson for the number 1 pick. I'm like, hold on a second. Jokingly said I would take that.
The thing is, a left guard is a hell of a lot easier to find than a franchise quarterback.
And the Bears got the money to take.
If it was Nelson straight up, I think you take that in a heartbeat. I don't think that'll happen, but we'll see. Yeah. Well, and let's wrap it up here. It's I guess basically what we're trying to say is everything needs to be evaluated. It really does. And this is, like I said before, the biggest offseason for the Colts since 1998. And the Colts can either hit on their hire as for head coach and hit on the quarterback they draft, and it sets them up for great success for the next decade plus. If not, the Colts will probably not get much better, and they will stick as one of the laughing stocks of the NFL for probably the next 4 to 5 years. That's why this is so important that they get the head coaching hire right and they get the quarterback hire. They get the quarterback selection right.
Yeah, and that's why it's very, very, very much like a fiery subject to hear that, Saturday might retain. Now, hey, who knows? Maybe takes the team to a freaking Super Bowl. I mean, if with an off season, you never know, anything can happen. But so many names, so many candidates. But I will say one last thing. I agree with Stats Matt that it truly should be an offensive minded guy. DeMeco Ryans, unfortunately, that kind of takes him out of the question because he's coming from his defensive background, also in San Francisco. But this is just the day after the regular season. That's the craziest part. So looking forward to covering the offseason for sure.
Wyatt Law says, Derek Carr, I'll show myself out. You get that business out of here, Wyatt Law. Stop. No more retread quarterbacks. No more.
I'm turning off my camera. We're turning off.
All right, guys. Before we let you go, so that way you can get off to watch the national championship game between TCU and Georgia. Colts player of the game, the last one for the 2022 season. Drake, who is your Colts player of the game?
For me, it's easy. It's Zach Moss. And he showed that he will be, with a healthy Jonathan Taylor and perhaps a new scheme, he's going to be a weapon. I mean, he's legitimately a guy that runs his face off, and he will run directly into you. He doesn't care about a little bit of contact. Then he's got a little bit of receiving prowess. He had 3 catches on the day. I mean, that's just a heck of a second, a backup running back and a guy to have in your backfield.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go with Rodney Thomas II. Rodney Thomas II got his 4th interception yesterday, led the team in interceptions this year.
As a rookie.
And hey,
yep.
I think he's going to be a great safety for this team for years to come. It'll be interesting to see how they work out that rotation with Rodney Thomas II, Julian Blackmon, and Nick Cross. And hey, he also contributed to the tank by missing that interception. I kid. I know he wasn't trying to, but hey,
love him.
In the end, it helped the Colts get the loss, get the number 4 overall pick. Stats Matt, I think we got the same brain, buddy. He says got the IT, helped us keep the draft spot. And hey, time to go watch McAfee on the Boys on ESPN2, because that is it for us tonight for the Horseshoe Huddle podcast. Again, thank you so much to everybody that was tuned in, that talked some Colts football with us. Stats Matt, Wyatt Law, JB, Taryn, Camden, there was a Chad, there was a bunch of other people that if I didn't get to you, I'm sorry, but hey, you're what makes our show so great. please go ahead and go follow us. It's going down on the bottom of the screen, that little ticker down there. Go ahead and follow us at Horseshoe Huddle. Like it on Facebook, at Colts on FN. Follow on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you know when Drake and I are going live. And we will be back tomorrow. Now, Drake, before we sign off, what things do you got? What things are you working on here up this upcoming week? Because we got a lot of content out on the site. What you working on, bud?
Boy, we've literally been just like shotgunning these things out. So, three pieces real quick. Should the Colts hire Cliff Kingsbury? That is more just for conversational, and I will tell you, it is exploding with all sorts of different
check it out. Check it out.
Will Jeff Saturday remain on the staff? And 5 hard truths about the Colts that they must face in 2023.
Awesome. I had my piece this morning about why this is the most important offseason for the Colts in 25 years. A report out there that Chris Ballard and not Jim Irsay will actually be the one leading this head coaching search, like we talked about here today. And I've got something about Jeff Saturday that'll come out tomorrow morning as well, and the things he said today. As Taryn says, love you guys. Thanks for watching these terrible games and talking to us about it. That's what we are here for. But we will be back tomorrow to discuss, as Wyatt Law says right here, the Ballard press conference. So a special Tuesday episode of the Horseshoe Huddle podcast. Chris Ballard's end-of-year press conference will be tomorrow at 10:30 a.m., and we'll be here tomorrow night to break it all down. So until then, he's Drake. I'm Andrew. We'll see you tomorrow night.